welcome to My Security TV and our Tech and Sec Weekly. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the Executive Editor and Director with My Security Media. And today we've got a special guest from the US, Mitigating Global Disruptions and Predictions 2022. One of the highlights for 2021 was Kaseya, and we're going to be joined by Jason Manar, their new Chief Information Security Officer. And I'll bring Jason on now. Jason, thanks very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's always good to have an American accent with us as well. Where in the US are you? Where are you based?
I'm down here in Miami. My dialect is actually from Kentucky. So if you hear a little bit of a Western kind of culture slang, don't have my cowboy hat with me, but a lot of people hear
Nice.
that in my.
Yeah, like I'm sorry, I can't pick American accents that well. Sometimes a Californian stands out to me, but obviously the Texas accent. Now, Jason, you're ex-FBI, and I understand, looking at some of the media releases coming out with Kaseya, they've brought you into the role. You actually worked with Kaseya during, we'll call it a breach or the incident around July as well, the ransomware incident. Maybe let's start off. You've been brought in as the Chief Information Security Officer, which is a challenging role at best, but obviously coming from law enforcement into sort of the private sector is also going to be a bit of a transition for you. But I'll hand over to you, mate, in terms of your role as CISO with Kaseya, and then we'll sort of expand out from there.
Yeah.
So been in the role since October.
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head. I got to know Kaseya in July during the event. They got to know me. It's one of probably more than 1,000 incidents that I've worked, which has allowed me a really holistic view that few people ever get. You get to see how companies have done things right, how companies have done things wrong. You get to see the best in breed products, solutions, policies, recommendations that every CISO around the world, maybe not every CISO around the world, but thousands that I've dealt with around the world, what they've implemented. And that kind of information is invaluable. And Kaseya saw that, obviously brought me on board, and we have really just hit the ground running, right? Making sure that we continue to harden ourselves, continue to have the best practices and policies that are in place, to ensure that we're where we need to be, not only today, but in the future.
Maybe if I can come back to the role with the FBI, what was your actual role in the incident? Or maybe if you can, your position at the FBI, was it an investigator or a liaison? Yeah, what was kind of that role?
So I have to be real careful because it's still an ongoing investigation.
And understood, yeah.
Right. So what I will say is, I was the cyber supervisor down here, responsible for all interactions with not only Kaseya, but everyone down here in Miami, Central and South America, the Caribbean, anything that took place down here. That was my role at the time. As to the particulars and what was done, other than I would point you to some of the media releases that DOJ has recently done on the individuals that they arrested and apprehended related to that incident, but that's really all I can say about it.
That's okay, and I understand. We almost had an interview with Fred lined up during that, and then it just exploded beyond there. But obviously there's a lot to come out of this and the learning outcomes. Is there any sort of standout learning outcomes that you had through that? As you say, you've been dealing with these incidents. This is not a new thing, and maybe that's a question I might bring is, were you seeing this sort of boiling up and escalating while you were there, that, ransomware and these types of attacks were bubbling up more to the surface again and again?
Right. So ransomware, as Australia knows, I think it accounts for almost 63% of all cyber attacks in Australia. And just like here in America, especially after COVID, we just saw an absolute explosion of ransomware events. And if you think about it, it really makes sense that the adversary would target people, because basically the attack vector just opened up. And as that attack vector opened up and you had more people working from home, and you actually had some companies that weren't prepared as they were working from home, 2 years ago when COVID happened and started shutting down some of their security systems, and it allowed the attackers predominantly a new avenue of ingress, and they took it. And it's very much a crime of opportunity as it relates to COVID, and they took advantage of that. They obviously have a business model that's worth billions worldwide yearly, and yeah, that's what we saw here in America, and I think around the world, was a huge uptick in and a huge uptick in ransomware and ransomware actors that were active while everyone else was trying to deal with a global pandemic.
Yeah. And your observations maybe on the payment of ransom, where do you think there was an underreporting there as well from what you were seeing versus what was probably actually going on?
Yeah, so what I can tell you, and I try not to get in trouble with my former employer here, but what I can tell you is we CISOs, as well as law enforcement, know that there's an underreporting of all cyber incidents. And when I say cyber incidents, I mean across the board. And we know that because you later will hear, and oftentimes it is in the media, where events have happened where people have never been notified. There's no, there are only certain circumstances in which people are required under law to basically report these incidents, and we found numerous companies that just were not reporting them. We knew by one way or another that they had been intruded upon, or that they were a victim of a ransomware, but because those thresholds of reporting had never come to fruition, they never reported it. So we know that it's underreported, and we believe we as a whole, CISOs, when I say we, I'm talking about the CISO community, believe that it's underreported as a whole, because we hear from our colleagues. I hear from my colleagues today.
Yeah.
I've been very blessed to have worked with so many great CISOs around the world that I have a wonderful network, and I even hear from them today. And quite frankly, I've been called by a few that have been like, "Hey, we're experiencing an event," and my first recommendation, whatever country they're in, is to call the equivalent, of the authorities, because there are things that they can oftentimes guide you and tell you that you wouldn't otherwise know about the adversary, how that adversary reacts, how they propagate through your network, what they're going to do, and whether or not there's oftentimes other associated attacks sometimes, depending upon the attack. Not just talking about ransomware, but talking about whether you have DDoSes or other types of intrusions. Sometimes they will do one thing to make you look in one certain area of the network while they're doing something else. That happens quite frequently, and oftentimes law enforcement and certain government entities have critical information that's going to help you ascertain very quickly what that is, where they are, and help you remediate.
Well, I had a question in mind even before you went down that path, and you kind of answered it, but would you support mandatory reporting where they have to report it, they've been hit with a ransom?
So at the end of the day, I'm very blessed that I'm not in the legislature, and I don't have to make decisions on whether or not mandatory reporting should or should not be enacted. In a perfect world, everyone would follow the transparency that my current company did and what they went through. In fact, I was very proud of how transparent they were. Very proud as how transparent Fred was about everything. And all you have to do is go and look on our website, and the videos are still up. Those daily videos that we had explaining what was going on to people in real time. I have not seen anything like it, and I'm very proud to be part of that organization that chose to be so transparent, because I really believe it's not if but when. And when that happens, you know, what type of company are you dealing with? Are you dealing with the type of company that is not going to report things, that is going to, you know, try to shove things under the rug? Or are you dealing with someone that's going to stand up and say, hey, wait, we can get better, and there's things that we can get better? And I'm very proud to be part of that remedy, and Kaseya, you know, getting better every day.
I was going to say, what is your key charter? There was a couple of hires there around June or July, but there was no CISO role, so it's relatively new. What do you have a clear charter for that uplift? You know, again, I would have thought that they handled the incident very well. Transparency is a good one as well, particularly with their customers also. But to bring you in this role, also, it sounds like you're a bit of a loss to the FBI. It's one of those balancing acts. So obviously that career transition is timely for you. But what's your clear charter? What do you think you're bringing to the CISO role with Kaseya?
So look, every CISO has a playbook, and as do I. And that's what I've been developing over the last several weeks, as I get to know not only my team, but I get to know the environment. I've been developing that playbook to harden our infrastructure, to have better policies, implementation, because everybody can get better. It doesn't matter where you are, right? So you name your favorite rugby team, basketball team, whatever. They can always get better, and they're always tweaking that playbook, right? But they're not going to go on live TV, and they're not going to tell you exactly what that playbook is, right? So I hope you can understand why I wouldn't necessarily walk you down play by play.
No, but I suppose where I'm going from is, do you have a clear charter, or is it really just to make things better and broadly across in that, almost bringing a traditional CISO role to, and I take it you're reporting directly to Fred, CEO structure, and then, yeah?
So the reporting structure, what I will say is I'm not going to comment on the reporting structure.
Okay.
What I will say is that we are defining and currently defining a process that's going to make us successful not only today but tomorrow, right, and in the future. And I would say to your question, right, it is a traditional CISO role, in which I'm responsible for the entire security platform and suite within Kaseya. And I'm very fortunate that because of the highlighted concern for security, that I have buy-in across all levels. And rarely does a CISO get to walk in and have buy-in across all levels of executive management.
Although one might say it might be easier after the incident as well, where you, one of those things with security, it's not often appreciated until after an incident. Maybe just for the audience, just in case there's some in the audience listening for the first time, maybe just explain Kaseya and as an MSP. And then what I'd like to do, my kind of the next question, just as you describe the company that you're with, is the reflection back to, say, the FBI and the like, and how you, now you've got the two views, the perceptions of each, possibly. I think it sounded like Kaseya had a lot of trust in the FBI and law enforcement in the incident. And but yeah, just explain Kaseya, I suppose, as a company. That'll help sort of put it in context of where you're at.
Right. So one of the things that I guess I would say is we're not an MSP, right? We're a IT management platform, you know, service provider to MSPs and small to mid-sized businesses. And we currently have roughly about 40,000 organizations that we service. And so we like to think that we're a one-stop shop, single pane of glass, if you will, for all your IT services, right? Whether that's RMM, whether that's dark web monitoring, whether that's our business platform, whether that's our rapid fire tools, and the list goes on and on and on at our level of offerings. But one of the things that I think truly differentiates us in this space is the way that our executive management thinks about clients. We truly think about clients as family. We truly think about clients as partners. And it is critical that we have relations with them and a relationship. And I think you saw that throughout the event. And I think that's why the response was unlike any other company that I think you've ever seen, because of that connection, because it didn't matter whether it was a small group of people, and I don't mean at all to minimize what happened, but the 50 or so clients, whether it was 50 or 40,000, it hurt the same. And that's why there was such a response. There was such an outpouring. That's why you got such wonderful updates. That's why you got such wonderful transparency. And that's why you had the CEO up at Connect saying, hey, look, you know, at the end of the day, we've got to get better. And that's why I'm here, because I want to help them get better. And that's a big reason why I'm here, because for years and years, I saw the little guy get absolutely crushed. I saw, you know, little small mom and pop dentist office. I saw doctor's office when they would be hit by ransomware and they didn't have an MSP or they didn't have an IT provider. They literally lost everything that they had worked their entire life to build. And it was heartbreaking. And in a way, by me taking this position, I'm able to help them by helping to secure Kaseya. And that means a whole lot to me. And I talk to my team about that. I talk to the people that I work with every single day about, you know, making sure that we keep that in the forefront of our minds. Talking about the FBI and where I came from, you'd asked me to kind of, you know, try to compare the two, if you will. You know, there's no other mission like that of the FBI. Protect the American people and uphold the Constitution of the United States. Never going to get any better than that. But for me, protecting the 40,000 the 40,000 plus clients that we have, the small and the little guy, and ensuring that they have the tools necessary to, you know, enact their livelihood and their dreams, you know, that's a pretty close second. And
I'm
so
assuming you come in with the same mindset. Your mindset doesn't really change. Looking at your background, you've been in cybersecurity for some time there as well, but you're a trained investigator as well. Do you come in it with that mindset in that context as well, where it's a fresh start, but obviously you treat it, you're on a mission, but then you treat it like you're sort of doing a bit of an investigation and audit just to get a state of play?
I think any CISO that comes into a new role has to do that, right? They have to do the quote unquote investigation audit, you know, to figure out what the field of play is, so to speak. So yes, from that perspective, yes, you come in, you want to understand what historically has been done, what's currently being done, and obviously, you know, what the plan to fortify, strengthen, and harden systems are in the future, as well as education. I mean, look, at the end of the day, oftentimes people are your weakest link, right? So you have to take education into consideration, ensure that there's a robust plan in place to continue to grow the knowledge of the company, the employees, as well as your end users and your clients.
Well, that maybe brings us to your plans moving forward, and one of the areas that we wanted to cover is also the predictions for 2022 and where you see things going, because obviously now that you're in the private sector, you can make that's part of your job, is to go, okay, what are the key trends and what's our environment going to be like? We've been getting a few predictions, as we do at this time of the year as well, and much of the same. So good luck to anyone who wants to predict 2022 after the last 2 years. But Jason, what are your key sort of focus areas? We can call them predictions, but what's your key areas that you see coming in those key trends for next year, and being in a fresh role as well?
Yeah. So one of those predictions, I think I told somebody, I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but I will anyway. I told somebody, I said, if there's ever mandatory reporting, I think cybercrime will go up at least 2 to 3-fold minimum.
Yeah.
So I don't, here in the U.S. So I don't know whether that will come to fruition or not, and there will be mandatory reporting or not. But that was one of my early predictions. My other prediction is, unfortunately, when the adversaries continue to do things and there's not, consequences and pain enforced, they tend to do the same things that they were successful at, right? So unfortunately, I see ransomware continuing to be a problem and an issue and explode. I see phishing attacks to also continue. And then one of the things that I started seeing more of that is actually a very small subset of attacks, but yet I saw more of over the last 6 months, was actually credential stuffing. There is so much information out there on the dark web and out there to be had with individual credentials. And again, we are our own worst enemies. And with people not changing their usernames and password with any frequency, I actually saw several intrusions based off credential stuffing, which normally I think only accounted here in the U.S. for 2 or 3% of all intrusions, something low. But with that uptick, I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden that becomes a little bit of a trend going forward.
And what would be your advice now that you've left law enforcement, and assuming you may not go back? Any advice for sort of federal authorities and agencies like the FBI? Things like as you say, if it gets reported, we've got a 2 to 3 time increase. I think that's one of the challenges for law enforcement. When there's underreporting, they can't resource appropriately because they only go on what they know. And then if it explodes 2 to 3 times with mandatory reporting, the uplift required, and it's happening here in Australia, there's a massive uplift in capability for cybercrime or cybersecurity. But yeah, what's your thoughts back to the FBI, and maybe not so much advice, but the trends that you see there moving forward, and maybe some of the areas that they should be looking at?
Right. So one of the things that's really, really difficult when you talk about cybersecurity and law enforcement is typically, whether it's whatever your municipality is, the local police, FBI, federal, whoever, it takes somewhere between 2 to 3 years to train one of those personnel to be truly effective. Cyber agent, cyber police officer, and have the skills necessary to do really technical investigations. And that is one of the hardest things when you're in law enforcement, because we're so used to being able to take from white collar to violent crime and move people around where you may only have a couple months learning curve. But because of the technical nature of cybersecurity, you really have to extend that out for a period of not months, but oftentimes years. And so that's where I see the tremendous challenge for law enforcement, even if mandatory reporting comes online, is once they see that, being able to scale that workforce up in a timely manner. And that's going to be very difficult. Now, what can they do? I think many agencies are already doing it really well, right? They're continuing to educate. I've seen more and more, whether it's local municipalities, federal municipalities, holding events to educate the public, not just the public, but companies, right? I've seen more offers of law enforcement to brief threats at the board level and the executive level, so that you don't just hear from the CISO, right? And you don't just hear from those in cybersecurity. You hear from basically independent third parties that are dealing with the threat actors that have the information that can point to a chart and say, yes, this is why it's exponentially going up. And that really helps. So I think short of the relational aspect that they can have with individual companies in the community, I think that's probably the most important thing that they can do, that relational aspect.
Yeah. I take it they must be bringing it up again. Likewise here in Australia, you've got to bring it up almost from school now. I think it's a bit of a a generational transition that we're all going through. I won't disclose my age, but you know, those early cybercrime and cyber courses should be getting done at school and through the recruitment process, and as they go through their probationary periods, should be cyber all the way, so that they're ready. It's kind of that new 20th century crime that they have to deal with now as a modern law enforcement officer, and always moving out of law enforcement into the private sector it's an ongoing thing. So you're not the first. Is there something that you are networking with other sort of FBI agents that have moved out? And there's also the Secret Service. There's a whole bunch of ex-law enforcement in cyber now. Is it something you've reached out already, or as you mentioned, they might have reached out to you already? So welcome to the club.
So there's probably a 50 or 60 person chat room of former law enforcement, most of which are FBI that have either had VPs, CISOs, have taken some type of job with the private sector. Also, you mentioned the Secret Service. I still have some of my best friends in the world that are still in the Secret Service that are phenomenal folks. Also, DHS, CISA, several entities. And yes, we have different ways of keeping up with each other, different ways of sharing threat intelligence. That's one of the best things. Yeah. Until I actually stepped out and started getting in to some of these chats, I didn't realize how beneficial that network was from a threat perspective. They've really helped continue keeping me on the cusp and the fringe of what's going on, as well as the government entities that continue to push out their flash messages and their IIRs and various pieces of information. But cybersecurity is really a small community, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter if you're a competitor or not. We know it's not a matter of if, but when, and we truly do want to help each other, because nobody wants to see somebody else go through an event. No one at all.
Well, that's your new gambit, I suppose, in terms of what your role is making sure, one, it doesn't happen again, but maybe it's one of those things we're all up against it. So you're certainly in the hot seat there. But I do wish you well, Jason. It's always good to see someone who's willing to talk as well. I'm glad Kaseya has been able to put you out in front, and always good to talk to a former FBI and now a new CISO with Kaseya. So we've been discussing mitigating global disruptions and predictions 2022 with Jason Manar, who is in his new position, about a month or so, as the new CISO.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, great. With Kaseya. Look, I do wish you the best, and we'll stay in touch with Kaseya moving forward as well. And hopefully we'll get to speak to you again and maybe even meet in person, Jason.
Pleasure. Yeah, that would be wonderful. I would absolutely love it. I'll come to you though, right?
Yeah. Well, again, I'm ex law enforcement here in Australia, so I already know that mindset of you've got to get a trip, right? Where's the plane? So no doubt they'll have you traveling around the world for sure, and you're always welcome here in Australia, Jason. No problem.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks to the listeners that stayed with us to the end, and really appreciate it. Anything I can ever do for you in the future, just please give me a call. And again, just honored to be a part of your show.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I wish you the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you.